What up, everybody? The real Terry Flenory has finally spoke for what I know to be the first time ever in an actual interview that will air on Stars. That's called Blowing Money Fast Part 2, a 6-part docu-series where we finally get to hear Terry's side of the story. In this interview, he speaks on the BMF plug El Chapo, the Wolf Jones situation, as well as his thoughts on his older brother Big Meech, the lifestyle he was living, and more. The release date of this docu-series hasn't been announced yet, but it will likely drop sometime soon after BMF Season 4. But today I'm going to talk about the 10-minute preview teaser and a couple of the stories that Terry talks about in our first look into this interview. And like I said, this being Terry's first interview since getting out of prison, even though Meech spoke in part 1 from prison, it was only at the very beginning of each episode. So part 3 of this series will likely be Meech's first interview after being released from prison. Concerning Terry getting started in the game, he said him and Meech were first generation crack dealers, meaning they started selling crack in the mid-80s right after it began to hit the streets of Detroit. He said they started out selling powder before crack really took off. Keep it in mind that in part 1, Meech said he started off selling joints and bags of weed. So Meech was likely selling joints and bags of weed before Terry got into the game, and once Meech hooked up with their first plug, E.D. Boyd, and started moving powder, that's likely when Terry got into the game. Similar to how they showed it in the BMF series, with Meech bringing Terry along when he first started working for Pat. Terry said they began to be known as the 50 Boys when they took $10,000 worth of rock and broke it into $50 bags. And sometime around this point in the BMF timeline is when Terry got shot. He said when he got in his car, someone put a gun to the side of his head, and when he went to knock away the gun, that's when the guy fired a shot at him, and it hit him just below his right eye. He said it made him lose consciousness, but the guy woke him up when he started nudging at him. He said he thinks the guy was trying to see if he was still alive. And when he woke up, he tried grabbing the gun out of the man's hand, and it startled the man because he was surprised that Terry was still alive. So he ran off and began to fire shots at Terry, but they all hit his car. He must have not known how bad it was because he said he went into his house and started trying to wipe the blood off in the sink and didn't intend to go to the hospital. And he said once he got to the hospital, Meech showed up to the hospital with a Mac 11, similar to how it went down in the BMF series. But unfortunately, getting shot damaged his retina, and Terry said that was very hard for him to deal with, and part of the reason why he always stayed in the shadows. The part 2 preview doesn't go too much into the story of what took place between whenever Terry got shot in the late 1980s to around 1997 when they hooked up with the cartel. So we'll have to wait till the full series comes out to hear Terry speak about what was going on at that point in time. And that's going to actually be one of the most interesting time periods concerning Terry to hear about, because we'll get his side of the real story of how he began to get involved with Tonisa Welsh, portrayed as Marquisha in the BMF series. But a couple things that went down during those years that we know from the part 1 documentary is that they left E.D. Boyd behind and began getting weight through a guy named Lawrence Newell and started having other dealers under them. And at that point in 1990, Meech moved to Atlanta, and somewhere in the mid-1990s, their pipeline coming in through Columbia dried up, and they no longer had a plug, so Meech had to move to Cali to find a new plug. And in 1997, through a business associate named Wayne Joyner, Meech and Terry got hooked up with a guy named Green Eyes Grammatico, who connected them to the cartel. Terry said when they first hooked up with the cartel is when things really started blowing up, and that they didn't even know what cartel they were working with at first. He said it wasn't until the cartel wanted to buy some jewelry to celebrate Cinco de Mayo, and Terry hooked him up with $2 million worth of jewelry from Jacob the jeweler, and the guy ended up calling him and thanking him in Spanish. and when he got off the phone, the guy asked him if he knew who he just got done talking to, and the man told him it was Chapo Guzman, better known as El Chapo. He said, and after that, the rest was history. Concerning what Terry had to say about the Wolf Jones situation, who him and another man were killed at Club Chaos after an altercation with Meech in the club, where Meech was ultimately charged with the murders of Wolf Jones and the other man and put on house arrest, but later the charges were dropped because Meech wasn't the shooter and the police didn't have any evidence. He recalled spending time with Wolf in Morocco when they flew to Morocco with over 400 people to go to a party that was thrown by the prince. Terry said that Wolf was like a brother to them and that he was supplying Wolf with 5 to 10 kilos at a time before the tragedy happened, keeping in mind that Wolf was also connected with Diddy and was his bodyguard around this point in time. Terry said after the tragedy happened, when Wolf and the other guy died, that's when he knew they were going to prison. He said because the violence brings the heat, so he knew that the cops were going to be coming. Concerning his older brother Meech, Terry felt like Meech was the way he was because how they came up as kids, being poor, and how people didn't recognize him. So he was the way he was because he wanted to be recognized. But as time passed, he felt like Meech didn't take the business serious enough because he never took any days off from partying and went out every night to the club. And even after the whole situation went down at Club Chaos, that he still didn't stop and began to get careless and sloppy. He said the final straw for him was when he went to meet Meech at his house to talk about his case one day. And Meech told him that he didn't have time to talk because he had a party that was about to start. And at that time, a bunch of strippers walked in and Meech was giving them $1,000 each. So Meech basically said, since he was on house arrest and couldn't go out to the club, he was going to bring the club to his house. So Terry said at this point he walked out and told Meech he probably wouldn't be coming back to Atlanta for a while, that he loved him, but he just couldn't do it anymore. And Terry got so fed up with Meech, his lifestyle and his partying, to the point that the wiretaps allegedly even had Terry discussing the option of taking Meech out if he became too big of a problem. This was also around the time of Terry's birthday party in Las Vegas, when Terry's crew and Meech's crew had a problem to where it almost got to the point where guns were drawn. This is when Meech and Terry officially split up and went their separate ways, and Terry rebranded his crew as the 263 crew. And ironically enough, soon after Meech and Terry split up is when the whole BMF organization got taken down. Like they say, divide and conquer, and the feds were able to do that by putting Meech on house arrest and putting pressure on him for a crime that he didn't even do. And there you have it. Leave your thoughts in the comments.